Nowadays, geopolitical situation in the world is not so simple. We can see crises in the Ukraine, and also events in the Asian sector are not simple as well. For example, Beijing consensus that has been recently declared. What is happening now? It's not something new. As usual, political spectrum is changing, but there is permanent intention to stability. In your opinion, what organizations, unions, companies can be guarantors of stability today?
I think on the whole, you are worried about that situation, it seems, than we are. We do not like the situation like it develops in Ukraine, not at all. Because it, how shall I say, it infringes on rules about stability of frontiers. And so we have to talk about that. How I was involved myself in the negotiations in the 70s and 80s about this stability in Europe, and we had rules about it, and now we find some of those rules being infringed upon. So that's important to start talking about that. Worldwide, I'm not, the world is a big place, and we are not thinking that much in terms of big powers. Certainly the Dutch are not, they never thought themselves to be a big power after Peter the Great. But you need some balancing acts sometimes. We had, of course, the support of the United States with some problems in the world that we have. We are not very keen on United States involvement in Ukraine or Crimea. They raise their voice, fine. But everybody knows, including Americans, that they raise their voice mainly because the Republicans are on the skin of the American president. I would like to be diplomacy around Ukraine a bit more silent. Like the Europeans do it. Like the Europeans also had a successful diplomacy with Georgia when there was a war. You do not raise your voice very loud and things like that, but the United States cannot do very much else because they are not in the Black Sea. Europe is in the Black Sea. Europe is not a military outfit, it's an economic outfit. And Russia needs Europe. It can do for a while with China, but cannot do with China for a long time. It's a very different world out there. You will find out. I've been living there myself. It's an interesting world, and it's good that neighbors find each other in speaking consensus or whatever. But I think it is good for neighbors to look always to both for all neighbors on all sides. So don't neglect China, don't neglect Western Europe either, and certainly don't neglect the United States. Just as much as the United States, to be honest, should perhaps not neglect Russia. It is. I know. I worked here in Russia in the times when it was almost desperate to see how much Russia wanted to be at the same level as the U.S. We are now exceeding the U.S. in production for that, production for this. I know that you are a big country, a big power. You have been bigger. The fact that you're not so big as in the past is not unfortunate, I think. It is, you have been perceived, and perhaps you were also, how shall I say, a factor of threat to your neighbors, your smaller neighbors. Being so big generated European Soyuz, generated up to a point NATO. That is the problem. If you're too big, you know the game of Stratego, perhaps. There's a game saying that if one of the players is getting big, all the others will gang against that player. That is the disadvantage and inconvenience of being big. So be happy to be smaller. We are happy not being so big anymore. The United States should be happy not to be so big. It's confusing for them. But they're not the only rescuer of the world anymore. They have found that out. Lessons in Vietnam, Afghanistan, Iraq, I think so. So nobody can save the world on one's own. Forget about that. European Union is a response to big neighbors, but also a response, the belief that the players within the Union, and Germany and France first of all, should be prevented to fight wars against each other. We were very successful in that. It was never meant against any other neighbor. So keep that in mind. Keep in mind that neighbors are not there to be enemies. They're there to be friends, basically. And so it's good what you do with China. Try to be friends with Europe as well. We don't have armies to speak of. We don't have before we can make decisions, it takes a lot of time. NATO is not geared towards war. Whatever you may think, it is geared towards defense. And yeah, sometimes it has to find itself a task far away in countries like Afghanistan, which you know better than we do. Afghanistan is a problem. Sometimes you're fortunate and sometimes you're very unfortunate in those adventures. I mean, both we have our joint experience. It's very similar.
Вопрос в дружбе, наверное, на разных уровнях. То есть имеется в виду
This is very
первые
political.
лица
Yeah.
или...
This is very political. So perhaps we have to climb down to a level that is practical and see how we can build links and swazi without suspicion to one another, not to try to convince, but to try to reason and say, well, this is our idea, this is your idea, and become friends like, in many respects, we are and we were.
Nowadays, such big and the most famous political organizations as G8, G20 and UN, these are the structures that serve the interests of only several countries. And as a rule, politics is just an instrument that realizes interests of corporations and some companies. This is an objective process. The process of globalization is finished. It is an objective view. In your opinion, what are obstacles that prevent from new world order functioning? Why do we observe economic, military crises? Maybe this is the difficulties of translation.
Yeah, your questions are always very easy. The United Nations is still our best hope for the time being, but the possibilities it has are limited because the 5 big powers still have to agree first in order to become effective, at least in the security field, in the military field. United Nations is relatively effective, not that effective, but it has success in economic and development-oriented areas. People don't talk so much about that. They talk about, it costs money, etc. But on the whole, the UN is doing good things in that area. And I myself think there's much more promise in that field, in that particular field, and in the field of exchange of information, in getting to know each other better, than in the security field, which always is so prominent. When we had a discussion in Europe in the 70s on the organization that even President Putin is calling now upon, the CEV, as it was called, the Europe Security and Peace and Security Organization, Organization European Peace and Security, OEPS. They're sending now in Ukraine the guys who are supposed to be neutral observers and who are taken hostage sometimes, that organization, I mean. That is one of the results of the discussions we had in the 70s on peace and cooperation in Europe. Basically, it was a discussion between the then rather new players of the European Economic Community, now European Union, and on the other hand, the Soviet Union. The Soviet Union had its satellite countries, its fraternal countries, We had a strip of neutral countries in between, and a bit offside the United States and Canada. They were part of the conference, but they did not really actively participate, certainly not the US, times of Kissinger. And there we had good rules for a number of things. Political, yes, Ukraine is now a little bit playing havoc with that. Economical, which we see the fruits of, and also in terms of information. Information and family ties. Those were the important elements. I think still those three elements should come hand in hand. That's the best future we have. And the United Nations is not doing so bad in the economic and humanitarian side. That's, well, we don't have much better. We cannot much improve on that. On the political side, the hands are tied because of the vetoes and all those possibilities of the Security Council. The best way to get the world a little bit organized is to trust on relation in the and relations between human beings, information, families, knowing that that neighbors do not want to fight wars, that territory is less important than good human relationship, that economic relations, if they're good, well organized, they benefit all. They're not just one party, because both parties have benefit from that, otherwise it will not work. So that is probably the best way to get to a better world order. Then, of course, you have also some disruptive factors like religion. The Orthodox Islam is not very helpful in these relationships, I must say. Islam, as we knew it, let's say 20 years ago, was much easier to deal with. Islam has always had these ups and downs in its orthodoxy. Maybe the Orthodox Church, maybe the Protestant Church, also probably, all churches. So religions can help, religions can also disrupt, but on the whole, human relations, information, economics are the vehicles that make people interdependent and friends. And territory, barely, doesn't help. Territory usually, it's very much Second World War. Hitler, Blut und Boden, blood and soil. No good for an argument.
Ну, в связи с тем, что вы высказали свое мнение, и, в общем-то, оно отчасти совпадает с нашим, Центр системных
Center SI thinks that there is necessity to create a new platform based on other principles that will support crisis-free development of territories, rational, reasonable development, and etc. The platform that will put technologies into practice, and it will do algorithmic support. I would like to hear your opinion about such an organization. Maybe this will be an organization that doesn't include first persons from different countries, but this can be international union of NGOs. And what do you think about creation of such a platform?
Как вы относитесь к созданию такой площадки?
The thing is, if you take on the top level, I admire your ambition and the hopes that are in it. You are a young generation and you should have those. I'm style. I'm older generation and perhaps too much a realist, although you wouldn't believe it, I'm still relatively young in terms of energy and positive intended ambition. I was, so let's say, huge international organizations, apart from what we have, I will not see it happen, not easily. On the ground operations, in the field of contacts, exchange of opinions, slow process, trade, cooperation in economic fields, human relations, holidays, look around for yourself, talk to people. Those are elements, those are peace builders. The best peace builder is to trust each other, not to believe that others are enemies or could be enemies. Why should we be enemies? There's not a great point in seeing a neighbor to be an enemy unless you have this what you had, we had this nice word, what was it, conspirologues, conspirology. It's a beautiful word, conspirology, coming into play. Forget about it. It's nice for spy books, or for those things, for novels, but it's not, it should not be really determining part of our lives. On the ground, there are good organizations that can be helpful. I was thinking of one when we were discussing over there, the Groupe de Bruges, I was just explaining, on agricultural policy making. It has people from Western Europe, but also from Moldova, also from Greece, also from various parts of Europe, not necessarily being members of the EU. I would easily, you can easily see that somebody here from the Agrarian University of Pittsburgh could participate in that, provided English is English spoken, or French. English is best. But those are the kinds of interchanges that are not policy making, not creating, but having influence, having connections, knowing people. The former, the present Commissioner on Agriculture in Europe, he was part of that little think tank oriented group. It's a bit green, it's a bit ecologically interested. Not too green, it's not Greenpeace, it's a bit greenish. Those are the contacts which are valuable, that you have people with some influence, bring together, getting to know each other, and find out that problems are very similar everywhere. Next meeting is in Romania, in autumn. The last one was in my country in the north, in my native province. Those are the contacts, I think, that are very, very important. Like the contacts between universities and between students. So I'm not a believer in fantastic new organizations, although the European Union in Europe, in Brussels, was a fantastic new organization, preventing forever war between France and Germany, which was the origin of 3 big wars, for 2 world wars, basically. Yeah. And Russia was drawn into 2 of them, because it had to side with Serbia in the First World War, in the Second. You were attacked by Germany after Germany had won. France had run over France. We were buying time in making a deal with Germany, a deal which they never forget in Poland. You cut up Poland between you. Well, the poor Poles, they were always cut up between everybody, and they don't forget that. That's the problem a little bit with history. So start bottom up. Not just top down. I never trust top down too much. Bottom up. I trust bottom up much more than top down.
Let's turn to another topic. I know that you travel a lot, but what is the driving force for that? Is it just interest or job? If this is a job, then what is the main purpose of your job?
This trip is, I'm at the age that I try to combine both. Usually it starts with, sometimes it starts with work, sometimes it starts with pleasure. I'm old enough to be able to enjoy the 2 of them, and I'm not fully dependent on my work. I like it, I'll continue liking it, I'm sure. Here I had the appointment at the university, and I have an appointment with one company which I like to visit. I met them a few years ago in the Netherlands. And in Moscow I have a few appointments based on the proposal we made half a year ago not even February last, to the city of Moscow, and on interest that proposal generates with certain Russian investors who would also like perhaps to draw on it for regional province capitals, regional oblast capitals. So that's the reason. Now, in between are the waterways between Petersburg and Moscow. And my wife and I, for a long time, already wanted to have that water cruise between Petersburg and Moscow. 7 days. Either the agenda was full or the boat was full. And this time, thanks maybe to Ukraine, I don't know, but it was a long time in our agenda already. We can do both. And we can have my appointment in Petersburg, have my appointment in Moscow, and the boat in between, and my wife. So, not so bad. That's a good combination. I recommend that combination to anyone.
But anyway, what is the main objective of your job?
Yeah, I think, well, it's a bit both. It's a bit both. What I hope to achieve here is, first of all, to establish the contact, the pleasant contact that we had, and to renew it. To visit one of the companies that I was curious about. We discussed it in the past, and now I can go and see. And in Moscow, hopefully, we have some progress in the projects that we are working on. But you know, I could have also fled to Moscow and taken the train to Petersburg or all the way around. So the boat is a bonus.
Well, I myself turn to metropolitan food security. I know that you are the president of this platform, and this platform works with food security of megapolises. You are interested in the development of cities, and I don't think that if the number of cities increase, the development then will be uneven. I have a question. Do you think the result will be the effect of scorched earth in these cities?
The problem of empty land is bad. It's not good at all. I mean, it's serious. So whatever happens, you should try to keep your countryside occupied as much as possible, and also cultivate it as much as possible, not necessarily at the expense of nature, but in good harmony with nature. I heard a Spanish professor some time ago, with an interesting quote, saying that untended landscape that is not cultivated, is similar to a tinder box, a box that makes fire next to a pile of wood, meaning forests. Bush forests are the easiest to generate, and they generate when you have empty landscape. It can be by flash fire, by bad weather. It can be by humans, but that burns, and then up goes the forest. So you need to tend landscape. In Europe, European rural policy, the policy of the European Union, is that you should try to promote, to keep people on the land. That's why a big part of the budget is still handed to farmers who tend the land. The basic condition is that they are there, that they keep the land more or less in order, and they do not anymore depend on, their subsidies are not depending on the price of their production or what they receive. That was the past. At present, they get it for the number of hectares they occupy. And that is a funny answer to the question. Of course you should try to keep people responsible for the land. Whether it's big farming or small farming, doesn't matter that much, basically, but you should keep the land inhabited. That said, for a reason or another, inevitably people find work, jobs, careers, glitter, mobiles, fun, pleasure in the cities. In the countryside, they have only the booze to live on, drink. Terrible. Therefore, yesterday I was rather happy to see young people not drinking for a change. It was very good. I like that. That's in the Russian countryside a bad thing. People who drink and whatever fun they have. So, if they can, they go to the cities, hope to make it better. In developing countries, this is much stronger even. Most of them do not make it better, but they cannot go back to the land. And the sad thing about the land is that very often small farmers do not find their children attracted to continue their farming work. They do not find successors. That is the problem. So in order to feed us, it's a factor of life. I think you can slow this process. We try to do that in the new member states of Europe. I mean, our agricultural population has shrunk from 20, 25, 30% of the population to 3 in the Netherlands. In Romania, Hungary, or Poland, it's still 25% of the population depending on the land, depending on agriculture, and they also will go down to 3, 4, 5%. But they have to find, first of all, jobs. Second, the land has to be improved because it's very often poor. It should be drained. You need wind energy. You need sometimes you need chalk in the land. I'm supervising one of our bank investors in land in Romania. They buy big tracts of land, improve it. 10%, 15% of their investment is to improve the land, and then find good Romanian tenants to work on it. That's probably the investment in land is necessary to feed us. Probably it's bigger agriculture than smaller agriculture that will do it, but smaller agriculture, if it finds a good niche market, an organic one or special products, then they can do very well. So the answer of my long answer, the short answer is yes, I agree. Land should be populated. It should be worked, and probably the tendencies are it's going to be bigger farming that has to do that. And you should keep some population on the land. Now here you have dachas. In our country you have dachas. It's not the same. It's a substitute for the weekend. But they're important. I mean, I'm not looking down on rural tourism. On the contrary, it creates jobs, it creates energy, it creates things. So the countryside should be admired, it should be liked, the landscape should be tended and appreciated, and sometimes financed a little bit. Forestry, things like that. Even if it is not immediately productive, something should be done. Otherwise you get robbers. You get old-fashioned robbers. Stinkerazin. Yeah.
Okay, yep.
I understand your opinion. And finally, as a patriot of my country, I would like to ask you, have you ever been to Russia before, and what do you think about the main values of Russian people?
They're terrible. That's their great advantage. No. Russians have a great heart, a bit sentimental. They're cordial, great, very cruel as well, one to another. Gosh, if you are in authority, you have to step down on somebody below. That is perhaps not so present as it was in the past, but it is very much in your nature. Be a boss and be strong with your. Whereas our society is a bit more egalitarian, but then we didn't have a revolution. Sorry, that's a joke. But that strikes me about Russia. So great people, really great to drink with, I must say. I'm not a tea drinker, not yet, but I may become a tea drinker. And cordial, great heart. I mean, if you're a friend with Russia, you're a friend for forever. That's fantastic. It's not like that in the West. They're much cooler, sort of, more distant. You're much warmer people. And yeah, what is your disadvantage? Why do you always think you need an inferiority complex? It's not good for anything. It doesn't help. Inferiority complex, is that, yeah, I mean, why do you think that others are always better? Nonsense. Because what you do, thinking it, is you have two remedies. You think, well, all the others are better, but we'll teach them. Others are not better, and you're not better. We're all human, we're a bit different sometimes, but very similar in most respects. And don't think of others as being very different from yours. We do not think of being better than the Russians, not at all. There's no good reason for it, and the Russians should not do the same. They don't, on the whole. On the whole, they think. My feeling has been over the years that they desperately want to be as good as a neighbor, as good as the Americans, as good as... be happy with what you are, my God. Yeah. Huh? And try to be good, and try to... But not necessarily in a sort of competition. Oh, we'll show the guys in a competition, more silent. Show that you are good in your skin, you're well in your skin. We are rather West Europeans nowadays, fortunately, thanks to the European Union to a large extent, are relatively well in our skin. It's okay. We don't have exaggerated ambitions. We have ambitions, surely, but not exaggerated ones. Same with the Americans. Of course, they're a big country there, but they're not as strong as they have been. They're not as strong as they think they are. They've been taught a few lessons. Amiable people, like the Russians, basically individuals. The Americans are great people. Yeah. And then you have sometimes your political leadership, like we have. Sometimes it helps. We think Obama is a great guy. In the Netherlands, on the whole, really a great guy. We didn't think Mr. Bush was a great guy. Not at all, to be quite frank. I think half of the Americans think the same now. About Mr. Putin, it's hard to formulate an opinion in front of the camera, because in the past we found him greater than he is now. he's not, because again he wants to show that, that's strong, yeah. The good side of that is perhaps that we should, perhaps in Western Europe, think a bit more about the Russian tendency, or the Russian wish to be heard, to be part of the big family, and to be respected for it. That is something we neglected perhaps a little bit, but not out of, I think more out of neglect than anything else. Not about bad feelings or so. No, not at all. And so the reaction, here we are, we should show ourselves. And if they don't want to listen, they have to feel it. Yeah, well, maybe you should listen a little bit more, but only a little more. Not much. The difference will not be that big. We're neighbors, and we should be good neighbors.
Okay, thank you. I think that here we can stop. Thank you very much for very interesting dialogue.
Now I'll be kicked out of the country, I'm sure. Fun.